When I joined Airtel, that was the time no one in the country spoke of mobile internet. There was not even 3G. We were running on 2G services. So anyone who is looking to change roles, opportunities, jobs, one advice I very clearly give is that you should definitely expose yourself to different experiences. I am actually one of those people who does not really believe in the segregation of growth marketing and traditional marketing. See, for me, marketing is always about delivering growth for the business. India is a 95-96% prepaid market, whereas if you look at the rest of the world, it's all postpaid. Ultimately, it's the same human who's consuming content on LinkedIn versus the same human who's consuming content on Facebook or on Instagram.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks by Indiefolio, where we invite top voices in marketing. Today we have Somil with us, industry veteran with over 16 years of experience, having led India's largest brands and served hundreds of millions of customers. Very excited to have Somil today and discuss his journey and get some insights on all things marketing. Welcome, Somil.
Thanks, Kavan. Glad to be here.
So, Somil, wanted to just kick this off knowing a little bit more about you. If I'm not wrong, I think you started off doing engineering and then it kind of went into marketing. So, why don't you share a little bit more about why marketing, how did you stumble upon it, and the transition you did?
I think engineering almost becomes a default option, or at least used to be a default option for a lot of people in my generation 25 years back. I came from a family where there were not a lot of professionals before my generation. So engineering was, my father was an engineer, so engineering became a default choice from that perspective. Having gone into engineering, obviously I like the technology side of things and I still do. But eventually I started getting a sense that in engineering college, you get exposed to multiple things, right? Especially if you're in a college like NSIT, which is among the top colleges in India, you get exposed to event management, you get exposed to organizing fests, which is where I started getting a sense that beyond technology, these are things which I was good at. Typically, you don't get that kind of exposure at school. And I think that somewhere sparked almost to say an interest to say, okay, I want to look at management as a field, not specifically marketing, but management as a field for future. Obviously, I started my career as an engineer, started to Cisco, worked there, and as part of that exercise is where I went into the management side of things.
Very interesting, Somil. I have a lot of friends. I'm 26, 27, and I have a lot of people around me who have done something, probably something like engineering, and now they are not sure about it. So, can you tell me a little bit about like what was going in your mind, in your maybe your family, when you decided to kind of change this? And what's your advice to anybody who's not happy with what they are doing? And if they want to jump ship, what's the best approach there?
So, I think there are two ways I would answer that question, Kaval. One is for my personal experience. Secondly, what my advice would be. My personal experience was very, I would say, self-discovery led. And when I say self-discovery led, why I say that is there's no one in my family or anyone in my even extended family who had gone to do an MBA course. So I did not have anyone in my extended circle to even go and ask that is MBA the right career choice. So for me, it was more by, and to be very honest, in fact, till second, third of engineering, and people will laugh at it, I didn't even know what a CAT exam was. And today I see people who are very motivated, the younger generation, that even in the first year, they will start talking, okay, I want to give the CAT exam when I'm in the third year. It was not the case with me. So for me, it was like when I started into my engineering journey and as I started looking at my peers and figuring out what's happening in the world, and that's where I figured out that, okay, this is where my interest could lie. So that is how I made that choice that, okay, I wanted to get into that sort of things. Maybe there would have been a different choice had I had that amount of information people have today. So maybe it was a blessing in disguise, but I think it's worked out well. I think for people who are not happy with what they're doing, I think that's a slightly different way I would answer that question, Kavan. If you are looking at something to do, if you're not happy with what you're doing today, then the choices you're going to make are always going to come from a very different place. That you're looking for something which is not there right now. And that is very difficult to answer. Because then every person's motivations are going to be different, every person's aspirations are going to be different. Versus to say, like the way I looked at my career, when I was doing my engineering job at Cisco, I was very happy. In fact, even if I look back now, I would say that was one of the best organizations I've worked with, even though I worked with them for just 1 year. So it was not that I was looking to do an MBA because I was unhappy with what I was doing. I was very happy with what I was doing, but I knew that I could do even better if I go to the next phase of life. So as long as there are people who are willing to say improve from where they are, take that improvement first mindset that okay, I'm adding X value here, but if I add this kind of skills, maybe I'll add X plus Y value. I think that is the way people should be thinking, and I think even from people at your age group, and I clearly can sense that. I think that incremental value add obviously is very core to your generation as well, right? That what is the impact we are making. So I think keep in mind where you can make the best impact. If that is clear, I think then the path will automatically become very clear for everyone.
Very interesting. I don't hear this often, where try and kind of be better at what you do, then you'll be able to unlock a lot more opportunities for yourself. And I also feel, I mean, I could be wrong here, but whenever I have seen people jump ship, they've done their bit to expose themselves to other things. Like in your case, probably the events you were leading at your
Yeah.
college. A lot of people just tend to stick to one thing and not sure what they want to do, and they don't really try to expose themselves because they're like, college should expose for me, or my parents should expose for me, or something like that. But I think it's on you to go ahead and expose yourself. You learn a lot more.
Yeah, totally agree with that, Kavan.
I now wanted to just learn a little bit about your journey very quickly. You spent, I think, almost a decade in Airtel, then led marketing at MakemyTrip. Then I think you were in States for Innovator, and then now Shiprocket. So if you can give a quick, in a nutshell, kind of an answer, or what you did there, what was your responsibility, it'll set some good context for the viewers and me.
Fair. No, I think, like I said, obviously I started my career with Cisco as an engineer, then went on to do my MBA at IIM Lucknow. After that, straight from campus, I joined Bharti Airtel as part of, they have a management training program, which is called as the Young Leader Program. So joined that. And even at telecom, and I would say somewhere, like it's always said, you connected dots looking backwards. I always had an interest in telecom, always had an interest in mobile telephony. So Cisco and Airtel actually prepared me from that sense. And when I joined Airtel, because of my experience with Cisco, and at Cisco I worked with global players. So I knew that mobile internet is the future. When I joined Airtel, that was the time no one in the country spoke of mobile internet. There was not even 3G. We were running on 2G services. This was 2008, 2009. Right at the room. So actually, I was one of the very few people who, when I joined Airtel, I said I don't want to work on voice, which was 99% of Airtel's revenue, and I said I want to work on mobile internet business. And everyone in my team, everyone in my seniors group said that why do you want to go to a business which is not even 1% of the revenue? And I said I know that this is the future, and I want to be a part of building the future. So eventually, I became part of the team which launched 3G services in India. Then we launched 4G services in India. Then for Airtel, the entire product stack which got built, that whether it was a Wink music service, which is still today, you have an Airtel TV app today, which is now transformed into Extreme app. So all these apps were built with me when I was there at Airtel. So a lot of partnerships with players like Facebook, Google, all of those I built together with their global teams. And again, a lot of this you have to remember this is a pre-Geo era. So after Geo came, then data, mobile internet, anyways become ubiquitous. With everyone had free internet in their hand. But before Geo, today people will laugh at it. The pricing of 3G internet was 250 rupees a GB. So in that era, getting people to start using internet on their mobile meant you had to come up with new ideas, new product solutions every day so that you can get people to start using these services. So that was predominantly my role at Airtel. That how do we build mobile internet as a category, drive product innovation, drive new experiments, so that the expansion happens. And eventually, after Geo came in, I think a large part of my role also became how do we stay ahead of the competition, because pricing is just one lever, and on that, Geo had clearly shown the market what they are capable of. So while Airtel responded, but how do you build in more intelligent ways of creating solutions for end consumers? That is where I focused on. So good long tenure at Airtel. After that, I briefly moved into a hardcore B2B role at Cushman and Wakefield. So this is a company into the real estate services space based out of the US. So I was leading the marketing efforts in India. Did that because fundamentally my career thought has been that how do I expose myself to new experiences and newer learnings. Airtel 8 years hardcore B2C. This is as B2B. Cushman Wakefield was as B2B as it can get, so it gave me that experience. After that, for a brief period, I also ran my own startup wherein I was advising a lot of young startups in the sense that how can they grow their businesses, what marketing strategies do they put in. And eventually I moved at MakemyTrip, where fundamentally I was leading the entire marketing efforts for the India business, and they were expanding into Gulf during the COVID period, which is an interesting space in itself. So that is also the entire marketing effort that I was leading. So again, a lot of learnings there as well. I had learning from telecom, I had B2B learning, I had learning from my own startup, and then coming to travel. So that just journey happened. And my last place just before Shiprocket was, like you mentioned, I was working with this US unicorn by the name of Innovator. Again, a very different space into the health tech space. Companies based out of India, primary market of operation is the US. So very different way of operating, a very different way of learning. Again, I was leading the entire marketing function over there. So the entire journey has been around how do I get more experiences? How do I make sure I am learning every day something new? And basis my experiences, how can I bring value to the organizations where I work for? That has been my, so as to say, the mool mantra on which I've operated, and that's what I look at every day as I get up.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, very, very few people look at so many different roles and industries in not a long time, 15, 16 years span. What do you have to say to a lot of, let's say, people who want to be in your shoes in the future? Like, some advice which has been floating around is, hey, if you want to be a product manager, product karo 10 saal. If you want to become a growth manager, a marketing manager, look at those verticals. And then there is obviously also the segment and industry conversation where you want to become a CMO and maybe in an Airtel, you stick to telecom, boss. If you want to do it in SaaS, you stick to SaaS. But you've been an outlier there, right? You've done so many things. What would be your advice, right, to someone who's probably excited like you, who thinks can do product growth, marketing all together across segments just to be curious and learn? Do you think that affects? What do you think are the pros and cons of that, if you can unpack that?
See, I think, Kavan, on this, the first and foremost thing as an individual, you should be open to trying new things. And you should be open to almost to say experiment. See, when I started off my career and when I was making those choices, I did not have a, in the sense to say, I did not think that I am doing this for different industries because I want to grow as a CMO quicker than everyone else, right? That was not the end goal. The end goal has to come from inside, that I want to learn new things. As long as if that is the place where you're coming from, that I want to learn about different industries, different units, different functions, then if you make these choices, they are going to add up for you. But I see a lot of times people just switch jobs or switch roles or look for job role changes just because they think it's the cool thing to do. Just because they've seen someone else do it and work for them, and they say, boss, I also want to do this. Then I think it's a slightly tricky place because it's not coming from an inner conviction. So for me, like, I have done product roles, I have done business roles, I am now leading marketing. All of those came from a position where I said that this is the experience I want to gather because I want to become a better business person. Now, the larger goal is that I want to make an impact for whichever organization I'm a part of, and hence what role fits best in that organization scenario. That is where the goal is. So I think even for youngsters or anyone who's looking to change roles, opportunities, jobs, one advice I very clearly give is that you should definitely expose yourself to different experiences. So even if you're in a marketing role and today eventually you want to become, and everyone will say, I want to become a CEO at some point in time. If you're a pure marketing person, you would have very, very rare examples across the world that pure, you spend 25 years in marketing and then you become CEO. You have to become a CEO. You also need to understand product. You also need to understand finance. You also need to understand HR. If you're an organization like Airtel, you also need to understand technology. And I think you can see examples even at Airtel. So people who have grown even in the Airtel ecosystem are people who have had cross-functional exposure. And I think that is where my thought also is, that if your end goal is I have to be the CEO, then make sure you're getting all those experiences. You could have an end goal and say I'm happy being a product manager, right, or a product head, and that's my end goal, and that's fair, right? Everyone has different aspirations. If that is the goal, then I think you will find that you build a deeper expertise in product and engineering and tech and say, okay, I'll spend 10, 15 years in this field. Even there, I still feel that you need to have an exposure to certain ancillary functions so that you just get a way of thinking how those functions are operating and then how do they impact you as a product manager. If you're a product manager, you should still be spending enough and more time with your marketing team and your marketing function, understand how they operate, how do they think of consumers, and bring those insights back when you start becoming a better product head. That's the way I would think of it.
Awesome. I think, yeah, I believe that at a leadership position, the more intuition you have on other departments, the better leader you will be. You'll be able to communicate also effectively and collaborate effectively with other people. Let's say you joined Shiprocket recently. When the leadership is getting you on board, a lot of newbies think, yeah, how will I be selected in this company when, let's say, I have no logistics experience? At your level, right? Like, how do these conversations go? Why do you think that someone who doesn't necessarily have logistics and SaaS as an experience is still being selected? What do you think are strengths which put to the table, which maybe others don't? Just wanted to get your take there.
I think it's the question for my CEO to answer as well, because, but on a serious note, if I were to think of it, so come on, if looking at today, right, I think industry expertise, while it's important in certain industries, but a lot of times, especially at the senior roles, what even I hire senior folks in my team, I think there are two things which I look at. I think industry experience is good, but fundamentally at senior level, you need people who can problem solve, who can have a larger vision, who can take people together. I think those are the qualities you look for at the senior level. Because if the person has a certain aptitude, then industry specific things they will pick up. They should just have the right attitude. So that is why the saying, right, that you hire for attitude and not just aptitude. I think that's a cliched statement over the years, but I still think it holds very true. That hire for the right attitude, hire for people who can take other people together, hire for people who have the willingness to learn. I think as long as those two, three tick marks are there, I think everything else falls in place. And especially at senior level roles, this is what you are increasingly seeing across industry, right? Not just in this industry of logistics and tech, but across, right? You have folks who have spent their entire lives in FMCG organizations. They are now moving to lead tech organizations, or people who led tech organizations are now leading global FMCG organizations. Now those crossovers happening because leaders are typically hired for their ability to drive business growth and not just for their industry level expertise. And I think that's how the trend goes as well.
Superb. I think these are all cliches for a reason, that they actually work. So glad to get that validation from you. For my next question, I'll just read this so I don't get it wrong. I'm just quoting. You've mentioned a good product with a great GTM strategy is better than a great product with a poor GTM strategy. Why do you say so? Can you again explain more?
I think this is something which is very, very close to my heart, and I think I've said it in multiple events, etc. See, very clearly, the thought has to be that if you have created a product, it needs to solve a problem for whoever is the intended consumer, right? And if it's solving a problem, then you need to be able to communicate to the consumer that you solved a problem for him, right? And that entire communicating the USP of the product is part of the GTM strategy. And I think history is filled with examples, right? And for me, the best example is the iPhone, which most of us carry today, right? iPhone was not the first touchscreen phone. There were other organizations who had built touchscreen phone much before Apple had got into this market. iPod was not the first music player, portable music player. There were multiple other music players before that. But the way they were being pitched to market was very different. The way they go to market was very different. Versus when Apple brought these things to life, they changed the way of projecting this category itself. The smartphone was not just projected, the touchscreen phone was not just said that hey, it's a rather than a keypad, here's a touchscreen phone. That's not the USP. The USP is that you don't need to fumble. It's a seamless experience. It's a high-tech experience. When they built in the entire app store within the iPhone, then the USP was not it. They were app stores on the. I remember I had a phone back then, which was a Samsung phone, which was a touchscreen phone, which was there even before iPhone had launched. It had a app store on it, but they never spoke about the USPs. Apple said, "Hey, you now have access to 100,000 apps. You can do things better just on the power of computer in your palm." So again, it's not that iPhone was a poor product. It was still a good product. It was still a great product, but it also needed someone with a visionary ability of a Steve Jobs to pitch it as a strong GTM strategy. Versus you look at the predecessors which I spoke about, they obviously had a very good product as well, but I don't think they were able to crack the right GTM way or the right way to communicate the benefits of that product or the ability of that product to change lives to the end users. And I think that's ultimately they faltered away. and they became followers of what Apple did. This is just one category example, and the history is filled with more of such examples where there have been great products, but they just failed because they were not able to communicate their benefits to the end users in the right way. And I think that is where, for me, the clear thought is that the GTM strategy has to be absolutely spot on. And when I say spot on, it does not mean it has to be perfect. It needs to be something which is able to do what it is supposed to do, which is taking the product to the end consumers. As long as it does that, I think that the product, even if the product is good, it will still become better than someone who is great but does not have a GTM strategy in place.
So as a founder myself, and maybe a lot of people today are also maybe launching a new category, a new segment. At what level should we discuss distribution, GTM? Should it be baked into the product itself, or is it, because usually you first make the product, then you figure out how to sell it. I have spoken to some seasoned entrepreneurs who always say crack distribution first, and then for that make product. So wanted to know where you stand it, because you've done both, right? Product and GTM. You're an expert for both. So wanted to know your thoughts.
See, I think product building obviously has to come from a very core point that it needs to be solving a end consumer problem. When I say end consumer, whatever is your target audience. So, and I've seen that with entrepreneurs that a lot of times they build solutions first. And when I say, okay, what problem is it solving and for whom it is solving? They said that we'll figure out. So, to me, that approach, you are almost like I'm saying, half the way you're almost setting yourself up for failure. Because if you have not even identified what problem are you solving and for whom, then you can build the coolest technology, but if you don't even know who's going to use it, what's the point of it? So one, as you're building a product, you have to be very clear that who are we building for, what is the problem we are solving. And hence for me, the GTM approach is almost baked into that itself. That if you have identified that, say for example, I'm solving this problem for this set of audiences, then as you're building the product, you have to start thinking that, okay, if this is the audience, this is my communication. This is the USP I want to communicate. This is the differentiating factor I want to take to market. I know this about my audience, then these are the channels where this audience is available. So these are the channel mix I would want to deploy with my marketing team as I start going into it. And I think even if you are a young founder or even if it's a small setup, right, irrespective of that, everyone needs to find how they are going to make money. And money is going to come only when you're able to attract the right set of consumers into your product fold. So to me, it is very clear that you have to build the product keeping in mind what is the end problem you're solving. And secondly, I think as you're building it, at the same time, you have to start thinking of what the GTM strategy is going to be, which is the how fundamentally to say how are you going to distribute your product to your end consumers. I think that has to be baked into it, because at times, because if you are clear that what is my distribution strategy, you may want to tweak your product accordingly. Because if you say I want to go, for example, if it's a SaaS product and you want to go a trial first strategy, then you may need to build a product differently. Versus you say from day one, I'm going to have a fixed subscription fees to it, no trial, then your product strategy is also going to be different. So it makes a difference in the way you're building the product as well.
Absolutely. This has been a learning for me also over the years. I think great companies are the ones who figure all this out right at the start, because often you build a product because you love it so much, you care for it so much, you don't really you're like, "Arey, mujhe acha lag raha hai, to wo chalega," and that generally fails miserably. Next up, there's a big question mark in a lot of people's mind right now, which is what is growth marketing and what is traditional marketing. You again led both. I think, if I'm not wrong, in a couple of organizations, you led both teams parallel. So I know that there are two different functions. So there is a huge difference between the two. Can you again share a little bit more about what is growth marketing for you versus traditional marketing?
To be honest, Kavan, fundamentally, I am actually one of those people who does not really believe in the segregation of growth marketing and traditional marketing, right? See, for me, marketing is always about delivering growth for the business.
Yeah.
Any marketing function is supposed to drive more customer demand. Every marketing function is supposed to make sure that the brand is loved. And every marketing function is supposed to ensure that how are they driving revenue growth. Now, I know especially since the digital marketing as a channel has come up, I think that is where a lot of this terminology around growth marketing has started doing the rounds. Because fundamentally, when you look at classical marketing approach, which was pre-digital marketing era, was what? Offline marketing primarily. You'll do a TV ad, you'll do a print ad, you'll put a outdoor hoarding. And whenever you do things like that, the impact is also almost to say linear impact. If you are to take 10 TV slots during a TV show, then obviously probably your sales will see a lift. If you couple on top of that, if you put in a newspaper ad, maybe you'll see a slightly higher lift. That's how things would manage, right? Versus in a digital marketing campaign, you can run a campaign, and if you put enough money behind it, just because maybe in the same amount of money, you can probably get 100,000 people overnight as well, right? If you are willing to pay that much amount of money, right? So I think that is where the term of growth marketing started coming, which was to say digital marketing has the ability to almost turn on the tap of growth instantly if you put the right amount of money, versus offline marketing, wherein it will always have a gradual swing in the terms of business impact. But like I said, in my head, I think I would fundamentally just classify not as growth or traditional. I would say there's an online marketing and then there's an offline marketing. So those are two different channels in which you can reach out to your relevant audiences. But fundamentally, at the core, both of them are trying to do the same thing: is how do they drive growth for the overall business? And I think that's how I typically play out this scenario.
Got it. Now we're diving into some specific questions about your experience. You've been at the helm of, I think, how India consume data and even travel, right? So I'm someone who's a sucker for any insight from a top level, right? So do you have anything to share in terms of what was some, did you know, or some interesting insights you got when you worked at Airtel and MakemyTrip?
No, definitely a lot of them, right? I'm saying when you're working with at Airtel, it was 300 million consumers who were on the Airtel network. A lot of them made obviously voice and how they were using data. There's a lot of insights. But I think the most fundamental one, especially on the internet side of things, is, and this was again even before the 4G revolution hit the country, is video is clearly the biggest driver of consumption on internet. Like today, obviously, it seems very intuitive, right? If you have a 4G phone or a 5G phone now, how else are you going to use that 500 Mbps speed, right? You want to watch video. But even when India was in a space where there were 2 Mbps or 3 Mbps speed, which you used to get on a 3G, 4G connection, even back then, video was the primary driver of consumption. As if I remember correctly, at that point in time as well, up to 70% of the traffic that you used to see on our network was video.
Wow.
And we used to be amazed at that, saying it's only a 2 Mbps speed. You can't even get a proper, so as to say, streamless video experience.
Yeah.
But it still used to work. So fundamentally, India has been a mobile first market. We have leapfrogged the world. People don't have access to laptops, but they have access to phones. And hence, the video has become a very key driver of content consumption. I think that was a very interesting insight. And I think just the way India consumes telecom as a category, I think that itself is very different from how the rest of the world operates, right? That India is a 95, 96% prepaid market, whereas if you look at the rest of the world, it's all postpaid. Now, hence, a job of a telecom player or marketing person in a telecom team becomes that much more, I would say, complicated, because typically in the Western world, if you had acquired a customer, then your job practically ends, right? He'll keep paying the bill every month. You don't really need to think, okay, if he's churning, he's going to probably churn because either there was a very terrible service or because someone else gave him a very great deal. But people just don't switch for, if you have a postpaid connection today, it's very hard for you to just switch because, okay, someone gave you 50 rupees cheaper tariff, right? You will not switch for that. Versus a prepaid consumer, because by nature, that person has to go and do a recharge every month. Now, if there's a recharge happening every month, fundamentally that means in a year there are 12 decision point a person needs to make. And if you're making a decision once every month, obviously you're going to just look around or shop around, right? If you're going to do a recharge, you just go to say, okay, is there something else which is cheaper? Is there something else which is better? And hence at that point in time, you don't win a customer once in telecom in India. You have to win him every single month, every single year to make sure he stays with you. And that means your service quality has to be perfect. That means your product quality has to be perfect. That means your network experience has to be perfect. Because almost like someone is signing your report card every month. Just imagine that, right? So that becomes a very different job for a marketing professional. And I think that's how the tasks are defined. So very, very interesting space is the telecom marketing space, definitely in India. I think if I were to talk about travel as a category. And I think travel also has almost to say its own set of peculiarities, if I were to call it that way. Why I say that is when Kavan as an individual, so typically, how would you do, say, segmentation or marketing? You would say, okay, this classical segmentation behavior says that, okay, Kavan, SECA, lives in Mumbai, owns a smartphone, etc., etc. So this is my offering for that consumer, right? Now, typically for most categories, this segmentation is good. And maybe you add on top of that certain psychographics that, okay, this is how Kavan behaves, this is what he likes, this is what he dislikes. And then you create a marketing campaign around that. Travel has its sense of very different peculiarities. Kavan travels differently when he's traveling for business. Kavan travels behaves differently when he's traveling with his family. Kavan behaves differently when he's traveling with his friends. And Kavan behaves very differently when he's traveling solo. So the same Kavan with the same behavior traits, with the same psychographic traits, with the same demographic traits, has a different requirement for each of these different journey types. Maybe Kavan goes once in a year on a religious pilgrimage as well. 5 different journey types for the same consumer, and you need to be able to answer all of his different perspectives when he's looking at you as a travel service provider. So, as a marketing team, how are you able to segregate Kavan into the same person into 5 different cohorts and make sure that at the right time you are giving him the right communication, right? Because if today I know that Kavan has made a business trip from Mumbai to Delhi, now the classical approach says that, okay, I know that the average frequency of travel for a user is 4 times in a month. So I would say, okay, I'll tell Kavan, okay, next week again you will travel, so I'll give you a business offering. But Kavan may say, यार, I don't need a business travel right now. मैं तो अभी करके आ गया. Right now I'm looking. अभी तो long weekend आ रहा है. So I want to go on a pleasure trip with my friends. So why don't you talk to me about that? Why are you sending me this spam communication? So a travel player needs to be able to almost to say predict behavior changes with the same set of consumer, depending on what their past usage trends has been, depending on what their recent travel behavior has been, and then depending on what is the future travel category behavior looking like. So multiple variable, it's almost like a multivariate problem for each consumer which a travel marketer needs to solve. So I think that perspective, travel has its very different set of marketing challenges, and I think that's what makes the sector very interesting for a marketing professional. That's what I enjoyed there as well.
Fantastic. No, I think this is what exactly I was expecting. This whole prepaid bit is a big like, oh, 95%. And yeah, every month you have to make a decision. So that's very, very true. You mentioned Make My Trip, and I think that's a good segue to get into that. So loyalty programs have been on a lot of marketers' minds once again, a lot of founders as well. I think MMT Black is something which I have seen my friends, my dad, and all use it a lot. So if I'm not wrong, you were behind actually creating that with your team. So how did the whole conversation happen? If you can do a deep dive into what is a good loyalty program in terms of its features and characteristics, and how the whole MMT Black conversation happened and how you shipped it out.
Just from a clarification perspective, when I joined Make My Trip, the MMT Black program existed. It had been in play for a couple of years before that. But fundamentally, when I joined, this was incidentally, it was a time when COVID was there. So we were in a lockdown. And that, as I joined in, it gave us that opportunity to relook at the loyalty program afresh. So historically, the MMT Black program had been a very, if I were to use the word, it was a very opaque program in the sense that while it was on top of it a loyalty program, but there was no entry criteria. So as a consumer, you never knew what I needed to do to join this loyalty program or how I can join this loyalty program. The benefits were all just monetary linked. That okay, if you are a part of the program and you hit this milestone, you'll get this much cash back. So those were the only two, if I were to say, pillars of the loyalty program. And in my head, whenever you're thinking of building loyalty, you need to be able to give to the consumer what he's looking at from the category itself, right? So if I'm in the travel category, obviously everyone's looking for a discount, right? That everyone says that, okay, can I get a better flight ticket, cheaper flight ticket? Can I get better hotel rates? That is almost a given. But if you think at a deeper level, travel is always an experience. You always remember if you're going on a flight, while you look at the fare only when you're booking it, but if you don't get a good service on the flight, you'll probably remember that more than even if you paid the price slightly lower than that. So the way when I went in, the way I was thinking about the loyalty program was how can we make it more experiential? That how do we add more value for the end consumer from that perspective? Secondly, how do we also make it more transparent for the end user? That what are the filters in which you enter into a program? And how do we make it ultimately more aspirational? Because fundamentally, as humans, we always aspire to be treated as special. And if you are in a loyalty program, you need to get a feeling that you're special, right? If the erstwhile loyalty program just used to say, okay, you are MMT Black, here's your discount if you hit this tier. Okay, I'll get some money, but it does not make me feel special. So those are the 2 or 3 building blocks for me as I went about redoing the entire loyalty program. And eventually the loyalty program which you see today on MMT Black is what I built back then. Now it has one very clear entry criteria. It defines that, okay, you need to do this much spends to be eligible to become part of the program. It also then hence brings the element of spatial. How do you feel special? That if you are an MMT Black consumer, every time you open up your app itself, you'll see a very different experience for MMT Black. Every time you select a product, you will see special offers for MMT Black customers right there on the funnel. It will tell you, okay, because you're MMT Black, this tier customer, hence this is a special offer for you. Every time when you are even making a booking, MMT Black, and depending on which tier you are in, you'll get special discounts from our partners. That our partners will tell you, hey, because you're MMT Black, this is an offering you get which others won't get. So I think as anyone and for anyone who's looking to build a loyalty program, I think one it should be solving for what is that industry's core behavior. So even if you are, for example, a music streaming app and you think you want to build a loyalty program, then you need to add value for the user for that category. It cannot just be that, okay, I have a loyalty program and you get better discounts. No, that's not just you can do one tick mark, but then fundamentally you're not building loyalty. You're almost like building a discount behavior.
Right.
If you have to build brand loyalty, you have to service the user with what he needs from that category. So as long as you build your loyalty programs on those tenets, I think then that actually results in building brand loyalty. And fundamentally with MMT Black, that is what we used to see, that people who joined the loyalty program actually had up to 2x to 3x higher transactions on the platform versus people who are not part of the loyalty program.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, that is the core around building loyalty, that you get better business, you get better happy customers, better repeating customers. And I think that really worked for us as a brand as well.
Awesome. So I think core insight, exclusivity, and transparency, I think are 3 keywords at least I heard. If I'm a business, is there a certain threshold which I need to reach after which I should introduce loyalty program? Do you have any thoughts on that?
See, I think loyalty program obviously makes, to my head, a lot of sense, especially when you have reached a certain scale where you want to retain users. See, if you're at a very early stage of the business where predominantly you're just building the business and the focus is more on acquisition, then if you put in a loyalty program, I think it just complicates things from that perspective without, I would say, a lot of commensurate return. So if you reach a certain stage where you have people who are potentially leaving you for others, then is when you have to build a retention wall around them, is when something like that you think of a loyalty program.
I think also they need to invest in getting the customers to at least transact for a good time. Otherwise, it may be a very hefty fee. Why should I, pay you every month? So I think that point, yeah. And very curious, and in terms of, is there any mechanic on how, or is there any formula on how you derive at that pricing for that loyalty? Is it derived from CAC LTV simply like that, or is there something else?
If you were to go into the mechanics of how should you calculate the value for loyalty program, I think fundamentally it again boils down to this, right? Every money or every dollar, marketing dollar which you spend on a loyalty program is fundamentally money you are taking away from putting that money in your regular marketing campaign, right? And every marketing campaign today is run is being measured on a certain ROAS benchmark. That if you spend 1 rupee, are you getting 6 rupees back, 7 rupees back, whatever is the number for industry? I think in my head, a loyalty program has to almost fulfill it. I would not say marketing campaign, but it needs to be evaluated as a marketing campaign. That if I am putting, say, $100,000 into my loyalty program, is it giving me commensurate return? Whether and the commensurate return has to be in terms of whether it's seeing an incremental repeat behavior from the people who are part of it, and hence am I making more money or not? I think that's the way you should evaluate it, because if it's not giving you commensurate return, then you would rather take that money and spend it into your regular marketing campaigns where you know that you're getting a certain ROAS. I think that's the benchmark for me from a loyalty program success perspective.
Makes sense. Now I want to actually touch a little bit upon B2B and B2C. So you've of course been in various companies doing both of them, but I don't know if it's just me, but I have seen lines blurring. I'm seeing B2B companies now getting influencers, running ads, and when I ask these folks, and some of our clients also do that, and we create that content, their entire logic is ki yaar, B2B in the end of the day is a human being. They are on social media, they're on Instagram, Facebook, chilling. But as you know, it's a very complicated buying process also. So where do you stand in terms of how would you bucket a B2B strategy versus a B2C strategy, and do you think lines are blurring?
Definitely lines are blurring, Pawan. And in fact, I see that happening every day. To be honest, I am one of the proponents of someone who believes in this very closely, that B2B does not need to be boring. See, fundamentally, I think when you say B2B, B2C lines are blurring, I think it's coming more from the fact that traditionally B2B marketing has been done in a more steadfast, boring kind of a manner. And B2C has always been more exciting, more peppy, and those kind of communications, right? I think that is where I say, when I say blurring, I think that's where my head is at. That B2B needs to be more in line with what the end consumer needs. And if you look at, again, going back to the first principles, right? What is the job of marketing? Marketing's job is to grab your target consumer's attention, make sure that he receives the message, and then if you are able to communicate your USP as well, that person should be able to act on it and come to you for business, right? First principles of marketing.
Right.
And I'm saying, why does that not apply to B2B? Even in B2B, even if you have maybe an enterprise product, but ultimately that enterprise product, and it will be bought by a buying committee. It's not one individual who's making a decision. But even in that buying committee, you have to be able to capture attention of, if there are 5 members in that buying committee, you need to capture their attention so that they see your solutions. Now, the traditional way would have been that, okay, you go and do an event or you do something else, and it still works. But today, if you're in a B2B organization and not using the power of digital marketing, for example, then I think you're leaving a lot on the table. And on digital, that's the nature of the beast, that you need to be able to capture attention. And you have to capture attention, then you need to be, your content has to be engaging enough, your content has to be eye-catching enough. And it's not just that it can be eye-catchy and then there is no meat inside the content. There has to be meat, and which classically every product should have. But if it has to be eye-catching, it has to take all the best practices which everyone else is following. So in today's world, influencer marketing has come up as a big channel for brands to put their message out there, because influencers are almost playing the role of, I would say, pseudo television marketing.
Yeah.
Earlier, brands used to go on television. Why did you brand advertise on television? Because of the reach.
Right.
Now, the reach is being provided through influencers. So
Right.
people go there. If you are a B2B brand and there is an influencer who is able to get your message in front of your target audience, you should definitely do a partnership. But I think the only thing to be cautious, which I give to every person, is don't do things again for the sake of doing that, because everyone else is doing influencer marketing, तो चलो मैं भी जाके एक influencer पकड़ता हूँ, जब उसके 1 million follower है, उसको बोलता हूँ मेरे लिए वीडियो बना दे. यार मतलब everyone needs to do a certain level of due diligence. अगर वो, if that influencer is a travel influencer, you are a software company, does it even make sense? Probably no. So figure out who is the right person in your space. It need not be a 1 million influencer. It can be a 100,000 influencer as well. As long as it's going to the right audience which you want to go after, definitely. And I think that's where the lines are blurring for me between B2B and B2C. It's more about how do you capture attention. I think that's where the thought is.
I fully resonate that fundamentally to matlab marketing pillars to have to be applied. And you said digital. So when I talk to some people where they say B2B digital marketing means LinkedIn, is that true, or do you look at other platforms, or have you looked at them at Shiprocket or Reveser?
I would say there is two schools of thought there, like you rightly said. One is that B2B is primarily only LinkedIn. And to be very honest, I think till about, I would say, a couple of years back, I used to be in that school of thought as well. But fundamentally, as you say, as the platforms have evolved and as user behavior has evolved, right? Again, it comes to the same fact that ultimately it's the same human who's consuming content on LinkedIn versus the same human who's consuming content on Facebook or on Instagram. So I would still say that even if you're a B2B organization, and if if you can target your relevant consumers on the Facebook or Instagrams of the world, I think then you should definitely explore them. I think a lot of times when people used to say LinkedIn is the business first platform is also because when you're running an ad campaign on LinkedIn, you're able to target roles, jobs, responsibility a lot sharper, right? And hence it is an easier way for you to run a B2B campaign. Versus if you come to a Facebook and Instagram, you have to go more of interest-based campaigns. You have to understand, you have to put more levers. You will not have a corporate history, you will not have a title history.
Yeah.
And hence so you need to have a much more sharper understanding of who your target audience is.
Correct.
And that is why I'm saying it's not for everyone, but if you have that insights about your end consumers, if you think that you can sharpshoot those consumers on these channels, I think again it makes a lot of sense because ultimately that's where people are spending time. And advertising today is a factor of how you can capture attention in the limited attention span which people have on social media platforms. So if someone spends say 30 minutes on LinkedIn in a day, probably the same person spending 4 hours on Instagram scrolling reels in a day. So if you that's a marketing choice. Do you want to capture attention in 30 minutes where 20 other brands are buying? Or you want to capture attention in a 4-hour window where probably 50 other brands are buying, but you still have a longer window to make an impression and make an impact.
I think that's like a good checklist to fill before deciding. So thanks for that. Now I wanted to talk about partnerships. It's something I know you mentioned multiple times, and I think you're very good at that. And I think specifically at Airtel, again, I could be wrong here, but I believe you cracked some big partnerships. I think some of them were like industry first also. So my question, when you are at Airtel, firstly, massive scale, 300 million people, and you're talking to top 3 5 companies in the world like Apples and Googles and Facebooks, etc. What's the partnership conversation, right? Like partnership always is that, hey, you get something, I get something, will benefit everybody and ideally the end consumer as well. So if you can kind of tell me a little bit more about how those partnerships came into be, what was the deal as such, just curious.
So, like you rightly said, Kavan, I think partnerships is all about what's in it for both the sides, right? So, whether it's a partnership between the largest companies in the world or even if it's at a smaller scale, you need to be able to create a proposition where both partners feel their objectives have been met. And I think even the examples you spoke about of my partnership experience with players like Facebook, Google back in the day, I think again this was a time frame where India was still, I would say, learning how to use internet, and hence the success metric was very clear for both the sides. So for a Facebook, it was very clear they wanted, or for a Google, it was clear they wanted to drive more people to start using their products because as more and more people use their products, that's how their revenue model works, that's how their monetization model works. And at the same time, they knew that without a telco partner, that backbone of using their products would not be available. So it was very clear for both of us that we need to get together in a room, find ways in which we can take mobile internet is the core product which you want to take to market. There's a role which telco is playing. There's a role in which Facebook, Google, or the content players are playing, and how do you create solutions around it? So, for example, one of the solutions which we built it with Google, was something which we called as happy hours. Now, what we did, and again, taking a step back, this was a time when internet used to be 250 rupees a GB, right? So, if you are watching a video on YouTube, and this was time YouTube had just launched a download feature in India, so you'd want to download, right? But if you are paying 250 rupees a GB and you're even downloading a 200 MB video, that's 20% of your pack gone in one video, right? So where we brought the telecom lens in it was that we said that okay, we also are able to see that during certain hours of the day, our network usage goes down. That typically it says that, for example, night 2 a.m. to morning 6 a.m., the network is almost free. I have put in a capex, so I can't take away that capex at night. So the network is there, no one is using it. So then why don't we build a product where someone can schedule a download? So if you like a video, you don't need to download it now. You schedule a download. This download will happen one during the time when my network is empty. So it reduces the choking of the network during peak hours. And then as a telco, as I said, yaar, mera network to khali hai na. I'll give you a 60% discount on what your download is. So if it's a 200 MB video, I'll only charge you 100 MBs for it. So for the user, it's a win-win that his pack lasts longer. For YouTube, it's a win-win because they are able to get the new product more in the hands of more people. And again, for the telco, it is a win-win because one, I'm able to move traffic from my peak hours to my off-peak hours and also monetize that network which was otherwise lying idle. So it works for all three partners. And fundamentally, that's the partnership thought wherever I've been. That how do we ultimately, for the end user, there has to be benefit, and in the same way, how can it help both the partners as well?
Wow, I absolutely love this. I think it's such a cool idea. It hits the problem very well and it kind of takes advantage of your strengths too. What would you say is a good time to consider partnerships as a lever? So, we are a B2B company and we do leverage partnerships and we have been since quite a while. But a lot of consumer companies often are not sure about that. They feel it's at scale. What is your take on that?
See, on partnerships, one of the things which I strongly believe is that you should do partnerships one when you have the right systems and processes in place as well. That even if you're a young company, like you're saying about your own firm, I'm sure there is someone who is looking dedicatedly at all the partnership conversations, someone who is able to think, okay, what is the value add which if we get into a partnership, one, what is the value add for each other, and secondly, what is the value add for say the end consumer as well. That needs to be very clearly defined. So as long as there is someone who can think of partnerships as a full-time thing and think of the contours of it, I think then it is a good, I would say, good idea to get into partnership, irrespective of the scale of the organization or irrespective of the stage of the journey. I think as long as you can hit those marks, it's fine. A lot of consumer companies, like the example you are saying, I think that is where they lack, is what I'll be honest with you about. They don't really have someone looking at partnerships full time. It almost becomes like someone's add-on job to say, "यार अच्छा तू sales देख रहा है ना, तू ना partnerships भी देख ले." When that happens, then, and nothing against that those organizations, but fundamentally, if you ask a salesperson, and salesperson, a successful salesperson is someone who's thinking very sharply in a very close window that how do I get these kind of consumers to buy my product. The DNA is very different from a partnership person who has to be more collaborative, who has to think more also on the lines of, okay, this is good for me, but also at the same time, is it good for the other person as well? So that's a very different skill set, and I don't think a lot of consumer companies, especially in India, have built their teams around that. And I think that is why they hesitate or they fundamentally believe partnerships as a model does not work. But wherever organizations you have seen who have put their minds to it, wherever they put the resources behind partnerships as a team, I think you would see them have great success with the partnership model as well.
True. I think it's a very underrated channel. I keep on hearing, of course, digital and even hardcore inbound and outbound sales, but rarely I see a lot of people talk about partnerships. But the more smart people I speak to, the more I realize, okay, actually partnerships really, really help out for you to get a head start in many areas. Before I get to the last question, I wanted to cover a little bit about Shiprocket. So I think bunch of things to cover there, but I'll focus on just, I think, one aspect, which I think we haven't covered so far is event marketing, right? I think, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right. It's SHIVIR, right?
That's right.
SHIVIR is a growth summit which Shiprocket is, I think, just hosted. What can you tell me a little bit about B2B and a lever like an event marketing? When should you do it? Is it good? What kind of products are suited for it? And what to expect when you do an event like SHIVIR?
Again, I think Kavan, this is going back to the first principles of marketing, right? That fundamentally, how are you able to take your product to your end consumer in the best possible manner, right? Now, there are two ways of doing events marketing. One, obviously, is that very clearly you call people who are just interested in your products and services, in the sense to say you invite them for dinner, you do some educational seminar for them, you do some webinar for them. Those are all fair ways of doing events marketing, right? Webinar is also a form of event in that sense. Now, the way when we at Shiprocket were looking at this event, Shiprocket SHIVIR, which we just did in August, their goal was slightly different. Our goal was that there are a lot of conversations in the country on e-commerce. There are a lot of conversations on e-commerce for the larger players. But if you look at someone who's a young entrepreneur who is probably just setting up his D2C firm for the first time, or someone who is a seller who's trying to sell online for the first time, if they need to come and learn of how should they run their businesses, there are not a lot of event avenues for them. And hence, as Shiprocket, we wanted to build that forum for them to say, hey, come here, we'll bring the experts from the industry, whether be it experts from the marketing space, whether it's experts from the logistics space, whether it's experts from influencer marketing space, we'll bring all of them together for you so that you get to learn from them how to grow your business. My objective of organizing SHIVIR was actually not at all to say that Shiprocket has built these 20 products, learn about them. That is just almost to say incidental, because if I am organizing SHIVIR, I will have a corner where I'll be talking about my products. But if you were to look at the charter, the agenda of the event, 95% of the conversation of the event were around how can small young entrepreneurs grow their business and learn from the best. So I think from an events marketing perspective, like at the stage we are at, we want to do a lot more of thought leadership kind of conversations, how we grow the ecosystem together. For say someone in the younger in the journey, and maybe even for Shiprocket, say 5 years back, probably a lot of our event conversations were all about how am I able to increase my brand awareness? How do I sponsor events? How do I make sure my leadership is in those events? How they're making themselves visible? And secondly, if I'm doing an event, how can I better engage with my prospective customers? That okay, can I call them to dinner, have a conversation with them, understand what the challenges are, how can I help them with their challenges, those kind. So depending on the stage at which you are and depending on your position in the industry, I think events marketing has a very different play altogether in that sense.
Fair. I think I understand at your scale. I think it's a lot about ecosystem development, thought leadership. So you're sowing a seed earlier on. But have you observed, like, when you do event marketing, conversion cycles are shorter? Or because I keep on hearing these tech crunch stories once in a while. Ki, "Arey, $200,000 we signed because the whole buying committee came to my stall." Is that true? Does that, or even do sponsorships even work in the first place?
The way I look at sponsorships, Kavan, I think sponsorship is a good way to drive brand awareness.
Okay.
So, if you are someone who's trying to make a mark in a particular industry, then sponsorship just gives you a almost a easy headway to getting recognized in that segment.
Right.
Ultimately, you need to back it up with your product experience and product solution as well. Sponsorship just makes it easier to be discovered by your prospects. I think the other aspect about events marketing, how does it influence overall sales cycles? I fundamentally believe, I think it's, I would say, not just event marketing, right? Even if you do your classical offline marketing the right way, see what an event does. An event fundamentally increases your brand awareness. An event fundamentally makes you a better known brand with your prospect audience. And they should be able to get a better understanding of what who you are and what your solution is. Now, because of those things happening, I think that is the impact on your conversion cycles. That because you are now more in front of them, because now they understand you better, and hence, if you want to go and do a conversation with them, they would say, "Acha, hi, now I understand the solution better. So, okay, let's move forward in the conversation." And it's not just sales cycle, right? Even your digital campaigns, if you are a firm which is running digital marketing campaigns, their conversion rates you'll start seeing improvement. Because again, if you are running, for example, even a search marketing campaign, now earlier there would be someone who probably knows a little bit about you and he's seeing your ad, versus now someone who's attended the event, met you, heard about you, seen you, understood your solution. When he sees your ad, he says, "Hi, yaar, now मैं तो समझता हूँ क्या करते हैं. Now let me click on their ad and see what have they brought for me."
Nice.
And this is my experience. You will see significant improvements in your sales cycles. You will see significant improvement in the efficiency of your digital marketing campaigns. And you will never be, if you were to look at the classical attribution model and say, yaar, does event marketing deliver ROI? And you say, अच्छा मैं मिला तो क्या हुआ? Maybe you will not get an answer. But that is where you need to look at a holistic marketing funnel performance. Yeah, my funnel has started improving. That is the impact of event marketing. And that's how you should measure success of events.
Awesome. Yeah, I was looking at an answer like that. Awesome. So I think it's the funnel which you need to look at, because it is multi-channel marketing impact which will have overall. Cool. Coming to the last question, Somil. So what would be your advice where if a operator today, either in business, marketing, is going 0 to 1, and you can give me two answers for B2B and B2C if they are different in the first place. If I am an operator kicking off a business going 0 to 1, what are the bets I need to take, strong bets I need to take in marketing and growth ideally, is what I wanted to know from you. And you can give me two answers for B2B and B2C if they are different in the first place.
My thought on that, Kavan, I think at 0 to 1 stage, I think it's very important to be able to stick to the core. So when I say stick to the core, it fundamentally means one, don't try to solve multiple things for an end consumer. And I think taking a step back, first of all, define who your end consumer is. And I know it's at times difficult when you're at this stage. कि यार अभी तो मैं product build ही कर रहा हूँ या I've just built the first version of the product, maybe there will be trials, which is fair. But even before you are going to market, at least have your what you typically call ICP, ideal consumer profile. At least have that profile in mind. One. Secondly, have a very clear answer of what is the problem you are trying to solve for that ICP, and then define what is your marketing mix. I'm not saying that stick to this even if you think that this is not working out. Organizations make pivot all the time. That's absolutely fair. But at least at one point in time, stick to that. Okay, this is my ICP, this is my problem solution, this is my USP, and then make sure then you hammer that in your communication as you go to market. As you will take it to market, you will have learnings. People will respond to it a certain way or not respond to a certain way. You'll meet consumers, take their feedback, go back to the drawing board. Maybe you'll come back and say, okay, my ICP probably is not this. My ICP probably is only this. And then here, I think I was solving this problem, but as people are using my product, I'm figuring out they're actually using it for something else. That is a learning. And then, but ultimately, make sure that you're at every point in time, your communication, which is going out in the market, is reflecting what is at least your best thought of what is the problem you're solving.
Got it.
And keep it very clear around one problem which you're solving for the end user, and keep iterating on that. Keep running iteration. I think at 0 to 1 stage, it's also very important to have multiple iterations very quickly. What they, again, I think it's been a afternoon of cliches, but again, they say, no, think fast, break fast. So I think it's almost on that sense.
Right.
Keep iterating, learn, keep iterating, and then keep making changes. I think that is my advice to anyone in the 0 to 1 stage as well.
Awesome. I think focus on the core and iterate. I think that will really help you out. Is ICP something which you need to guess in the start and just experiment, or is there a better way to crack the ICP?
I think again, to me, Kavan, it goes back to the first question which we asked, right? Wherein to say if you are building a product, you need to have an ICP in mind even before you're building a solution. Because if you don't have that, then again, it's a good to have solution maybe for someone, but you need to define it. So to me, if you're thinking of an ICP after the product is made, I think already half the battle is gone somewhere else.
I mean, like, chalo, I made an ICP, and when I'm coming up with an ICP, is there a methodology to find the right ICP, or it's also about guess karo, banao, iterate karo, and then learn? Is that the mantra?
No, again, I think the ICP definition to me has to be in the sense to say for whom is your product going to add the maximum value.
Okay.
So if you are a B2B company, for example, then you may say that, okay, my product adds a lot of value to design heads within marketing teams. At least that's how you build the product and that's how you build the solution. Versus you could always say that, okay, my product is a marketing tech solution. So I want to go after everyone in marketing. But then you'll just be wasting your efforts. You'd rather just okay, let me go after the design guys only and maybe the CMOs after that. But first head is clear, my design head ke mind mein ghus jaun, then I'll figure out a way for the other.
Brilliant. That's about it, Somil. Thanks for spewing amazing yarn for the last over 1 hour, actually. It's midweek and you've taken out an hour right before lunch. So I really, really appreciate that, and I hope you had fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kavan. I think I had really good time. I hope a lot of my insights will be helpful for people who watch this show of yours. And I always give my best greetings to everyone who's building a business. I know it's difficult, but whoever is building business or who is even building careers in the fields of marketing and business, I think I have got help from my seniors, and I think that is my way of giving back. So if anyone even find 5 minutes worthy in this conversation of over 1 hour, I would say it's time well spent. So thanks a lot for setting this up.
Awesome. That was the aim. And hey, thanks once again, Somil. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in so far. And if you like this one, watch out for the next one. We will be again having a top voice coming very, very soon. Thank you so much.